Well, staying with politics and staying in Canberra now, from July 1, early childhood education, we're being told by the government, is going to become cheaper, they say, for 1.26 million Australian families. Now, that's a move the government says will allow more parents to go back to work. But what good is that when we're facing a workforce shortage in childcare? Now, there's not many people in Parliament pushing this issue, but I'm pleased to say the independent MP for the Sydney seat of Fowler, Dai is, and she joins me now. Great to see you. Great to talk again. Congratulations on your election again. What's your concern here with these changes, Dai?
Look, I have no doubt that the changes in terms of childcare, providing subsidies for 0 to 5 years of age, will obviously encourage, it's supposed to be encouraging more women to go back into the workforce, which is fantastic. But there are quite a few issues from my perspective. First of all, we have got a workforce shortage, as we all know, across many industries, not just childcare, but obviously in the health sector, aged care, childcare, they're feeling it the most. And so my motion yesterday in Parliament was to ask the government to really address this issue, because if they don't address this issue, it's no point saying, it's cheaper childcare when people will still have a huge waiting list. Parents can't get their kids into childcare because there's no staff there to work in childcare. So I think unless the government address that problem first, people will not be able to reap the benefit of cheaper childcare.
I made the point, Di, at the start of the program that, many people can go and work in a cafe, a coffee shop and earn more an hour than you can in childcare, which seems to me we've got our priorities really screwed up there. Take me to Fowler and give me an example of a childcare centre there that you might know that is struggling to find staff, Di.
Look, I just had a forum with a few of the childcare providers in my Fowler electorate, and they've been just amazing. They've been struggling to find staff. One childcare, say Kids Matter in Cabramatta, they're struggling to find staff, but staff who can speak the language, but also staff who actually can also deal with children with special needs. That's actually an issue that have emerged in my consultation with the childcare sector in my community, is that in Fowler, I don't know what other electorates are like, but particularly in Fowler, many of the childcare centres have seen an increased number in children with special needs, those who've got autism or, who've got divergent needs. And so therefore, that means they would need special support workers in the centre. So while the new legislation in terms of cheaper childcare will take effect mid-year, the centres are very concerned because at the moment they don't know how they're going to be able to cope with the demand. So while the policy sounds really great, but I have no doubt for many parents across obviously the state, if not the country, but particularly for my electorate, it's going to be a challenge because of that waiting list is going to grow until they address, I think, the core issue. And the core issue is in terms of staff shortages. So that's one of those things that I've asked, really, hopefully through my motion, the government can actually address.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm, and you wonder whether the minister's actually got out there on the streets like you do in Fowler and talk to the people running those childcare centres.
I hope that every single piece of policy that we get, presented in Parliament, that our respective ministers, Member of Parliament, have gone out there and actually do the actual grassroots consultation with those that have been impacted.
Don't bet on it. They're not all like you. They don't all go out in the streets and deal with the issues they should, sadly. I just want to ask you about gambling. There was a debate on, I know this is a state issue, but Labor leader Chris Minns and Dominic Perrottet were on radio this morning in the first of a number of debates they'll have in the lead up to that state election. I mean, state politics in Sydney and New South Wales as well as anybody. Chris Minns seems to be continuing his opposition to pokey machine reform. Have a look at this.
What do you believe is driving him? Because he's
politics before people.
He's saying there's a lack of evidence out there that's driving his response.
What evidence is he looking for?
What do you believe is driving it?
Politics. was
6 years' time.
set their own limits.
Yeah.
In 6 years' time, look at your approach, kicking this into the long grass.
I don't believe that's the case.
I think they just talked over each other. I'm not sure too much was actually done in that debate. But in your area itself, is gambling and poker machines in particular an issue?
Steve, I think it is probably general knowledge that Fowler and Fairfield City in particular have got one of the highest losses in terms of gambling losses, I think, in the country, if not the Southern Hemisphere. We've got the largest numbers of clubs with pokies, I believe, in the Southern Hemisphere. And I think in recent news on the ABC, it's saying that in terms of the world, poker's machine, 75% of that is in Australia and 45% of that is within, New South Wales. And I can guarantee you that more of that is actually within Fowler and half of that is within Fowler and Fairfield City. So problem gambling has been, I think, a long time. It's everybody knows about the issue of problem gambling, and especially problem gambling in southwest Sydney. So it is, I think it's great. Congratulate the Premier of New South Wales, Dominic Perrottet, for taking a stand and pushing through that reform. I have said that I encourage and I urge the opposition leader, Chris Minns, to also make this a bipartisan approach, because I'm sure in his seat of Cogra, he would probably have, if he is in the community, he would know the impact of gambling in his community. I don't know how big the problem is there in Cogra, but definitely in Fairfield, I think we're the number 2, if not the first, in terms of problem gambling in New South Wales.
I'm not intruding here, Di, because I know you've spoken about this public yourself. You've had experience with this with your own mum, and she got hooked into the pokies at one point, didn't she?
Look, yes, I do have. I speak. I'm very much against gambling, and that's because obviously through a lived experience. I don't want to say it is my mother. It's it was a very difficult period for us. Years ago. She's aged and she's frail now, and so thank God for that, in a sense that she's not being drawn into that world anymore. But it has a huge personal impact on family members and loved ones. As I've explained before, the people who gamble, especially in our community, in the Southeast Asian community, they don't see it as a problem. They don't think that it's a problem at all. They think it's recreational. And people in worst case situations than my family, who are struggling with obviously finding a job, or struggling with raising a family, thinking that they can go to gamble in order to win, in order to have that money to survive. So there is that whole cultural aspect to gambling that I don't think many people in the gambling kind of space, the ones who are the experts who understand that whole cultural impact of gambling. So it causes a lot of, obviously, like I said, mental health issue, mental anguish, because it is a very you don't know where to go to ask for help, because first of all, the person who's addicted don't see it as a problem. Again, Di, lived experience from you, which is so important. Di Lee, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Steve.